yeah, I even remember one lady said, her mum had said to her, you better not eat that because no boy will ever love you. Even the theory of we have a chemical imbalance in the brain, that was never rooted in science. That was just a theory.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am very excited to chat with Dr. Natalie West at 5 a.m. her time in Melbourne, Australia. Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for accepting my invite. Can you share a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive deeper into how you really got into the carnivore, low carb, all of this world?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. No, I'm very excited because I know we've been following each other for a while. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I am an integrative psychotherapist. So, in relation to not a GP or anything like that, so I kind of work in a different space. I've been in this field now for over 20 years. So, what an integrative psychotherapist does, I've really looked at the gut brain axis, and that's where I've really sat for most of my career. And then also extending it into now, actually have now a certification in nutritional psychiatry. So I've just recently completed that. So that was very exciting. But for me, 20 years ago when I worked in the mental health space when I first qualified, talking about food and talking about the effects on mental health really wasn't something that was discussed. And really, honestly, even now, that's really not a first question that a lot of psychologists or even psychiatrists ask a person around, hey, tell me what's going on with your one lifestyle, but tell me what you eat. So for me, way back then, that was a very unusual question that I would ask people. But for me, it's also working as the body as a whole, not just separating the brain and the body and the nervous system and the circadian rhythms of a human being. So I basically incorporate all of that to treat deep root cause, not just the symptoms.
And how has your personal story led into your work with clients? What brought you to the carnivore world?
Yeah, so I've always been really what we would say healthy and understood. I come from a bodybuilding background, so I'd always, really steer clear of processed foods and things like that. And it wasn't until though I was on a bodybuilding structure for around 3 years. And, I'm sure, Sarah, you kind of know what that kind of means. It's very high carb, not a lot of red meat, lots of chicken and broccoli and rice, and, eating up to 6 times to 7 times a day. And, what had happened, obviously, a long period of time, my insulin, I became insulin resistant effectively. But it wasn't until I went and had some blood tests done because there was something in me that when I was eating, I'd be starving within 45 minutes. And I'm like, there's something wrong. This is not normal. So I went and had some bloods done. And he'd said to me, he goes, you're actually borderline type 2 diabetic. And I'm like, wow, okay. And this is, bodybuilding for 3 years. And then I had a bit of a break. So, but I would still maintain that certain amount of eating, right? So, and also to counting calories. And it was a very disordered way of eating. And the bodybuilding industry may look really healthy on the outside, but psychologically it's really not a healthy industry at all. So I was like, okay, makes sense. So he said to me, we'll just keep an eye on it. And I said, yeah, no, we're not going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to reverse that pretty quickly. So literally that week, I jumped straight into carnivore. And within 12 weeks, I went back and it was all reversed. So it was all gone. My bloods and my markers had gone back to normal. I wasn't starving anymore every time I ate. And my whole outlook on mentally, physically, everything changed. It was
Wow.
pretty life-changing. Yeah.
What year was that?
So that was 6 years ago now. So I've been carnivore for 6 years.
How was the transition for you?
Well, put it this way, I would really redo it a different way if I was to do it again. I would probably go one meal change to get my gut adjusted. But, for that first week, it was a bit of a disruption. As you know, that can happen. But after that week, I was fine. I just kept ringing, friends and colleagues and saying, I have so much energy, I actually don't know what to do with. Like, it's the most bizarrest feeling, but the focus and the clarity and even my whole weight training changed. Like in the beginning, yeah, I had an adaptation between obviously using carbs for fuel and then using ketones. But yeah, I was like, wow, everyone should know about this. But just even mentally, it was just a life changer for me. But in saying that, though, Sarah, I'd also been very lucky in my training, to be able to have a mentor who, even back then, had said to me, you really need to ask people, really what they eat, because you can't separate the brain from the body and the gut from the body. And, he said, otherwise you'll be talking to a starving brain for years. He said, and that's not fair for people. So for me, really, back then, I was very, very lucky to have someone that was, he was actually trained in orthomolecular nutrition. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but back then it was called psychonutrition. So, as we've evolved, and that's really where my passion, I guess, for really educating and teaching people, one, how their minds work, which is really important, and how their nervous system works with their mind and their brain and their gut. But secondly, food is something that's never spoken about.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you're interested in learning more about the carnivore diet, I will send you a free copy of my guide, the 30-day Carnivore Diet Challenge Guide, when you sign up to my newsletter at drzaldivar.com/newsletter. And if you're looking to work with me one-on-one, you can check out my coaching packages at drzaldivar.com/coaching. I recommend the 12-week program where I meet with you for an hour every single week over a period of 3 months, because in my experience, that's really how long it takes to shift your baseline dopamine levels, increase that baseline dopamine levels to a high enough level where it transforms your life and really gives you that food freedom. And you can use code YouTube to get 30% off the 12-week coaching protocol when you use the coupon at checkout. The coupon will expire in 48 hours. Now back to the podcast. So I want to ask you follow-up questions on your client work and how that has transformed and all the obstacles you're facing. But first, are you still working out similarly to the bodybuilding days? How has the training changed, cardio, strength training?
Yeah, well, also too, I'm 53 this year, so I'm obviously going through the menopause stage, but I wouldn't have any idea. I have no symptoms. Carnivore, I think being carnivore for so long has really set me up to be an amazing space to transition. And, I know that there's many, many women that struggle with it because we get told that that's acceptable. I train really differently now based on that. Especially women have to work far harder when we go through menopause to maintain muscle. So my way that I eat, still carnivore, but I eat very differently when I pre-train and after I train. But I actually don't do huge amounts of cardio anymore. It's just, I've realized that's just a massive waste of time. And I'm more of a weight trainer, really heavy, which I'll go for 20 minutes. And then I will actually do sprint work. So I'm really, changed up that a lot. And thank goodness, because, cardio is boring. It's the most boring thing we can do. But, I wouldn't find myself walking on a treadmill like I used to for 45 minutes or, even going outside. The only time I go for a walk is just for mental health and just to be out in the sun and to get that, say, circadian biology going. But yeah, very different training. It's sharp, hard, fast, and then I'm done.
Okay. And how many times a week do you do that?
3 to 4.
Okay, and the sprints are we talking about sprints on the treadmill?
No, outside.
Okay, and also 3 to 4 or twice a week?
So after my train, so I basically do 30 seconds flat out, stop for a minute or two, 30 seconds flat out. So I'm building up now to basically be able to do really 1 to 2 flat out. So I'm exhausted at that point. Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. And actually, I never asked you this, and I have no idea. Do you have children? How's the family life? Okay.
Yeah, so I have a 19-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. And my daughter's pretty much carnivore. She's, really just give me a piece of meat, mum, and I'm happy. Whereas my son, he's 19, he'll go and eat McDonald's and things like that I just really cringe at. But I'm like, yeah, mate, you'll work it out. If you get a gut ache, you'll find your way.
Right. You're modeling good behavior. And so that you've planted the seed.
Yeah.
And did you ever struggle with cravings or food addiction, binge eating, or it was not really a thing that was, you know?
No, I actually had disordered eating after being in the bodybuilding industry. So, we're taught to count calories. And, I weighed my food probably for 15 years. And
Wow.
then, yeah. Yeah. So even when I stopped bodybuilding, I was still weighing. So, for me, it was just that's all I knew in relation to what I needed for me. But the disordered eating part was you would get cravings when you eat that amount of carbohydrates and, obviously not much fat either. So you're kind of doing all of that. And mind you, I wasn't a qualified practitioner when I was a bodybuilder. Otherwise, I would have known that I was getting myself into a lot of trouble. So I was, bodybuilding over 20 years ago. But keep doing that and eating the same way, but not intensely training, then that was when it got me into trouble in insulin resistance. I'm definitely different now and going carnivore. But even in my practice, with my clients originally, it was always very low carb, but we didn't call it that back then. It was just eat protein because that's the best thing to do, and a small amount of vegetables, but let's just make sure what they are, but also incorporate fat into that. Yeah, so for me, it was just I had to undo years and years and years of attachment. And, definitely I remember, sitting in my car and, shoving bread into my mouth because that was just such an avoidance and you weren't allowed to do that. So I could definitely see very unhealthy patterns of dieting and dieting and dieting to get into a competition. And then you literally would just let go. And now knowing what I know in my microbiome, that then understood like what was happening mentally for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Are you taking
Mm.
any supplements nowadays,
I,
especially things for folate? That's something that I've noticed with long-term carnivores. If they're not taking organ meats, yeah.
yeah. Well, I was very lucky. I grew up with grandparents that fed me organs. That was normal for me. So, I couldn't even remember seeing a piece of broccoli on my plate. It was normally just, tongue, heart, brains, liver. So that was very normal. So I was very lucky. I had a really great, grandparents around me to feed me properly. But that was their normal food, right? That was very normalized back then. So I do eat raw liver. I don't chew it. I'm not that brave, but I just chop it up into little bits and I just swallow it like a supplement every morning. But I also do take magnesium threonate and magnesium glycinate. I
Mm.
think, everyone is magnesium deficient, even though eating a carnivore protocol, you're really not, competing with glucose pathways and stripping your body of essential nutrients. But it just, yeah, that's the only thing. Oh, and I use creatine when I train. Only
Mhm.
one on the weight training days. Which is great.
Fantastic. Okay. So now that we got everything we needed on a personal level, I'm sure we need more, but I want to keep it concise. So let's dive into your work with your clients and
Yeah.
how was that transition as you started doing carnivore? Because I'm assuming you probably started advising your clients on that once you started doing it. And how was that transition like?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, one-on-one clinic work when I first started, it was always a very low carb, and really just getting people away from cereals and things like that. So that was pretty normal for me back then. But just transitioning and just really opening my mind and, following people like, Dr. Georgia Ian and Chris Palmer and really understanding the ketogenic way of eating. And we know it's been around for hundreds of years. So it's really not, new. So for me, I then all my clients who were on that low carb, depending on where they were sitting, I was like, hey, let's just look more of a, ketogenic carnivore protocol because, of my own personal experience, but then also just looking wider into the community, and, my own colleagues like Dr. Chafee and things like that as well, where I was just, okay, I think this is definitely something that we could add into a protocol. And, I've got clients all over the world. So it really just depends on where they're coming in from. Some people will definitely come into a zero carb pretty quickly, depending on where their mental and metabolic health is. But other ones transition. It really just depends on them. So I'm very uniquely specific to what's happening for them. And, food is one part of my protocol, but my way that I work is also a part of my own psychotherapy protocol. So all the practices that they also have to do in teaching them how their minds work, consciously, unconsciously, and also what their nervous system does. Because you can have the best diet, and if your nervous system or your cortisol is spiking through the roof and you're very stressed, well, that's only going to impact you a small amount. But if we're not getting this nervous system regulated, then that's going to be a lot of a struggle for people. So I'm very specific with how I work with people. But generally, it's a pretty fast rule around most people's value with food, their attachment with food, and how they use their emotions through food, and also to their programming and their own value structures with themselves, and their behaviors when it comes to externalizations of things, instead of being internally operating out of their own environment. Most people operate from external validation or acceptance, which doesn't also help your mental health either.
Oh, I have so many questions about this. Okay, let's start with the first one. What percent of mental health do you find is related to diet?
I would say with my clients directly, I would say over 90%.
Wow, 90%. So you could basically be out of business if 90% of the population just eats a whole food carnivore diet.
So when we talk about that diet pathway, 90% of them don't eat well, right? So what I'm saying is their diet protocol, or the way that they're actually using food, is more than related to their patterning and their programming and their own self-worth and their own self-image. So they kind of really go hand in hand. So most people who contact me, like, clients share their progress, and generally, weight loss is a side effect of that. But what we're so, I guess, programmed to see is when someone loses weight, then we've got this diet mentality where we've got to jump on a diet. Oh, I'm going to try that now. I'm going to try that now. And really, that's just feeding the cycle. So, when I talk to people, I'm like, yes, my client lost weight, but the reason why she lost weight or he lost weight was because we took into consideration their mental and metabolic health first and foremost. Use diet as one pathway, but secondly, also teach them where their mind's going, what their thoughts are. Really, it's about breaking the habit really of who they were to who they want to become. And I use diet protocol as that foundation. But secondly, it's always around how's your value? What is your worth of yourself? And a lot of the time, no one has a relationship with themselves, let alone a relationship with healthy food. So, yeah. And when we talk about weight loss, and recently, probably in the last 3 weeks, I've had lots and lots of women reach out to me because of, I guess, they've seen client success, and a lot of it is just like, oh, can you just please give me your diet and exercise protocol? I said, it's not about that. It's actually about understanding the relationship with yourself and the relationship that you have with food or fuel. Because the thing is, if you just focus on that, we're focusing on the wrong thing. Yes, weight loss obviously is a metabolic health marker and a mental health marker. But if you just go in myopically, you're never, ever going to get to the root cause. You're just going to jump on and off, on and off, on and off. We've got to respect nutrition for a vital signal to feed our mind and our body and our nervous system, our vagus nerve, important, so that you're not on that, treadmill for the rest of your life. You're actually going, hold on, I've got to get rid of my attachments or my anchors in food externally, to bring my health back to myself, which is the value of myself. I've not worked with one person that, when I've taken them through my practices, that they have a relationship with themselves. It doesn't exist. They think they do, but the way that I ask it and the way that I direct my questions, because also too, we hypnotize ourselves as human beings into pretty unhealthy patterns, because we're, what you repeat gets rewarded, whether or not you're aware of it or not. So it's really important to understand where you're unconscious and conscious in your pattern and your behavior. And a lot of people are very, very, very unconscious when it comes to food. We will be emotional we've been taught to eat whether we're happy, sad, or indifferent. So what we do, we eat through our emotions instead of really understanding, hold on, does that serve me? Does that really serve my relationship with myself? Or am I doing it because I have an attachment to something that I need comfort through?
I love what you just said. That's exactly that has been my experience. I thought I'm a dietitian. I'm gonna be working and telling people, their macros and food, and it's the least amount of time that I spend in my coaching sessions is on food and exercise, and it's 99% everything you're talking about. It's like it's not about what diet, what is the best diet, what is the best exercise.
Yeah.
Because cake is not good. Everybody knows cake and cookies, no bueno. It's not about that.
Correct. But again, if we've been so conditioned to grab those things when we're stressed or we're feeding an emotion, you do that over and over, and your mind goes, well, that's an instruction. But also, too, our bodies are an unconscious memory of emotions. So it's not just our mind that we have to understand, because we can condition our bodies to feel a certain way. So, for example, Friday afternoon, most people are like, oh, it's Friday afternoon. People relax into their body and then they're like, oh, and then I'm going to go and eat something, or I'm going to go and have some, alcohol. Automatically, what you're doing is setting up your body for relaxation pathways via something that you've chosen externally to make you feel a certain way. So every single time it goes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, your body and your mind are also into Friday going, oh, I have a pattern here that is going to be activated even without conscious interference. So then when you choose those things, you naturally relax and your body has a recollection of that, like a recording. So every single time you anchor yourself in something, you are choosing an emotion that then your body gets used to and addicted to.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I go about it very similarly. I do the same thing, but when I talk about it, I talk about it within the context of habits and patterns,
Yeah.
which is very similar. But
Yeah.
it's so fascinating to talk about the body having a memory of your emotions. Dr.
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza, I believe, talks a lot about that. I love his stuff,
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do, do you think that everybody should be on carnivore for optimal health?
I really think it's up to them. I think empowering people to go, what, how do you feel consciously? So once we've got all the unconscious patterning out of the way, people can then really understand what conscious choice is. And again, acceptance, ownership, you get to choose, but make sure you're choosing from a conscious space, not an unconscious familiarity, which is not serving you. But the work that I do, people come out of that unconscious. So we really make that unconscious and the unconscious body very conscious. So people then bring back their agency and bring back their authority. Because most people, Sarah, the authority lies in the muffin or the donut. They're having these arguments with themselves in their mind and their body, but I should have it. No, I shouldn't have it. We should never be arguing with a piece of food on a plate, right? So it's really about bringing your authority to go, right, I've reset my mental and metabolic health. Now I get to choose. So if I choose something that I know that's not going to feed me very well, guess what? Because you're conscious, you get to choose, but not from a space of guilt and shame. And then the repeating starts, right? You're just like, why did I do it? Was it really my decision, or was I stuck in the environment again? Did I go unconscious in the environment? Um, my clients generally, when they go from low carb, and then they're like, hey, I just kind of want to go into zero carb. I'm like, great, let's do that. See how you feel. And a lot of the time, they're like, oh, I don't even need the other things. I'm like, great, amazing. But you get to choose how you feel. And again, if you're in optimal, a ketogenic or a carnivore state and you're living your best life, go for it. But you know what? If you add in some pasta and bread and you're like, well, that didn't feel very good. But a lot of my clients, once I've done that, they get the feedback. And I always teach them, honor the feedback. If you've chosen it based on a moment, honor the feedback. And then they all say, like, yeah, no, it's not worth that. I'm just not doing that again. And then they don't.
I love that. Since you have studied the microbiome, have you seen any anything interesting when it comes to carnivores and changes in the microbiome?
Look, I know that there's a lot of, I think Ben Sardi, I think he did a test on himself that where he actually had more bacteria than, the gentleman that he did it through. He's got an amazing video. I don't know if you've seen it, but he was really the only one that I'm aware of that actually had it tested. There may be some, but I'd like to know if I'm not aware of these. But Ben actually was carnivore, I think, for 30 to 90 days, and then had his microbiome tested, gut bacteria, and then after. And in the video, he talks about the gentleman who was doing it. And he said, "Hey, this is really interesting. I'd like you to come in." And Ben was like, "Oh, what's wrong?" He goes, "You've actually grown whole new bacteria that I've never seen before." But for me, with my clients, more than saying testing, just being, curious, I see the changes immediately, and so do they, just based on what starts to happen mentally. Because again, once we go through those transitional phases, people start to feel calmer. And within 2 weeks, I have people say to me, "I just feel calmer and just more chilled, a bit more focus." And then that just gets better and better. So for me, I'm like, well, there's transitions happening. And again, gently, going from a bad diet into a really healthy one and taking them through gently, because we all don't want to end up having to be near the toilet.
Right.
And that's the other thing with the microbiome. We don't want to kind of shock it with what we've been eating, and then all of a sudden we've got all this other information coming in. So it's like, let's be gentle. Yeah.
I agree. I agree 100%. I am more of the camp of let's transition you off of your usual dietary pattern. And I have so many phases that you can choose to go through. And that's how I did it personally, as opposed to getting somebody and telling them, if you want to work with me, like it has to be carnivore. It has to, it's like, I don't think that works for the vast majority of people, And some people don't even have to go. They don't want to go completely carnivore. Their 20s, they're athletes, I don't think we have to force it on them.
No, and this is the thing. This is where I think we've got to really give people their agency back. But again, a lot of people aren't really aware of how good that they can feel, because the food element has never really been valued, and also too, and this is going to sound really strange, but when we talk about the value of our mental and metabolic health, consciously, I think people hear and understand that, but they don't actually operate in it. Because if we really valued our mental and metabolic health as a conscious and unconscious agreement, we wouldn't be doing the things that we do, because the pendulum is not right. So, people will say, "No, I really do value my mental and metabolic health." And the reason I use metabolic health is because if we use physical health, your mind automatically externalizes it. So it'll go external, physical, which is most people's problems because they're only focused on the external, which is the physicality. But we're not really going internally and getting the mind to understand, well, I need to know what mentally and metabolically means. But again, we can't separate them. They go hand in hand. If you try to separate your mental health from your metabolic health, this is where the problems are, right? So it is about people understanding the value, but valuing through transition, because we're so social creatures and we've got such a social lubricant with food and alcohol. That's very confronting for a lot of people to feel like I'm the odd one out, I'm not drinking, and the other thing too, language patterns are really, really important because they activate a lot of energetic footprint. So whenever you think something, don't ever think it's just a thought. It has an energetic footprint to it, which your body remembers through conditioning. And then again, you'll be in the same pattern over and over again, even though you consciously tell yourself, "I know that's not healthy for me." You're like, "Yep, well, you need new data."
Right. And I wanted to mention this one study that I have seen that was published. It was a case report of a person who's a strict carnivore. And the diversity, if I remember correctly, was either improved or there was no change. So I thought that was a very interesting case.
Yeah, actually, now I have heard that. I'm not sure which one it was. I think there was diversity, or maybe there was another one, because I've also remember hearing diversity and there was no change.
I'll send it to you. It's I think it's recently published. So once you Google it, it'll show up right away.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, conditionally in the environment of, you know, nutrition and things like that, you know, we always get told that we need plants for diversity and things like that. And again, you know, we were told that, you know, saturated fat was going to kill us too. So I think we've really got to ask questions. But for me and my clients, like, I don't need an RCT to tell me, you know, how I am doing, or, you know, 6 years in, I'm still waiting for scurvy to come for me, and that's not happening, right?
Right, right.
My clients, they're like, this is the best I have ever felt.
Mhm.
And even some are coming off medication, some aren't as yet, but that's just again longevity. But the other part of that too, Sarah, is really helping people understand that if you are on medication, the power that those medications have in depleting out nutrients. So, you know, I think we really have to be very mindful of when we're given those things. Again, they don't fix anything. Antidepressants or any kind of antipsychotics don't fix the root cause. They just band-aid and treat the symptoms. But the symptoms also are created from, you know, depletion of massive amount of nutrients and minerals that we need. And no one's talking about it. You know, I think, again, we've really got to give people the power to go, right, if this is what you need also supplement with a whole array of different nutritional protocols. Because otherwise, if you don't, then you're going to get, excuse me, then you're going to get more symptoms, which then they're just going to treat with more drugs.
Exactly. The other day, I was watching something on mental health, and the study came out of how SSRIs actually mess up your microbiome. So it's not only that for a lot of people it doesn't work. There are people, I mean, at least anecdotally, I've heard a lot of people being helped by things like that, and I respect every person's experience. But also there are a lot of people who will have been on antidepressants for so long and they're still depressed, right? So it's not that, you know, it's not going to hurt in some cases, that it might actually mess up the root cause of why you have depression or anxiety to begin with, if it's worsening your microbiome.
Yeah, and again, you know, this is our first brain. Yeah, so
Yeah.
again, even the theory of we have a chemical imbalance in the brain, that was never rooted in science. That was just a theory. And again, you know, that was something that's like, well, let's focus on serotonin because that's the, you know, the happy chemical. But if serotonin, over 97% of it is made in your gut, then what we're doing and feeding and fueling that gut and that gut microbiome with toxins and, you know, hyperprocessed foods and all of those kind of things, it kind of makes sense as to why your brain's not really going to work properly. And, you know, again, the serotonin in your brain, which is what SSRIs will hold on to a little bit, but we're still not getting to the root cause. And I think I've been in rooms with other pediatricians and, you know, talking about putting 4-year-olds and 8-year-olds on antidepressants who are depressed. And I'm just like, one, that should never come out of, you know, someone's mouth to say that a 4-year-old is on a mental health care plan or an 8-year-old that's on antidepressants, because we're really not looking at the environmental process. And again, diet, you know, blue light, like every single generation is just so addicted to blue light, which also affects our gut, it affects our
Mm.
brain, it affects our dopamine pathways. It's all relative. And I think empowering people to say, you know what, let's look at why you're depressed. Why do you feel sad? What's going on in your life? Where have you come from? What else is happening? And just really get to know someone in a very different way, but also to empower them to look at things that maybe, you know, they've never been told before.
Hmm. Yeah, the blue light thing, I'd rather not hear it. It's so difficult,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We always, it's like this one last thing. I love to read a lot, and a lot of times right before I go to sleep, I am literally reading a whole scientific paper, and I'm supposed to be asleep right now, you know, and I can't stop. It's like this compulsion.
Well,
Not
one, you get, you know, we're passionate about those things, right? So it's like, I just want to keep going and I dig deeper into it. But it is just making sure that you're protecting your eyes and, you know, wearing the correct glasses or having a red light in your room.
right.
Um,
And the
but
blue light filters, which is good, right? They come pre-installed and stuff, so that
yeah,
helps. True.
yeah, 100%.
I want to, I have three things that I really want to cover. Um, Longevity, your point of view when it comes to that. Also, advice that we can give people who struggle with food addiction or cravings, and visualizations. So whichever one you want to start with, they have something to say about, feel free to start.
Yeah, so I'll go with visualizations, I guess, the first one, because, we've, I guess, heard so often, what manifesting, creating visualizations. But the thing is, our minds work on two things, so images and emotions, right? So we get a thought, a feeling, and then we get an outcome. But we've got to make sure where we're getting those outcomes from. So if we're conditioned to be in the same thought patterns and the same behaviors, we're just going to get the same evidence all the time. But the thing is, humans chase destinations a lot. So it's like futures out there. And then when I get there, whether I lose weight or I get this, and by the time we get to the destination, nothing's changed. Because the fact of the matter is, the only thing that we have in the present moment is now. So you've got to be very, very present in understanding, well, what am I trying to visualize here? Because are you visually doing it through consciousness, or are you doing it through unconsciousness, which is familiar, but then also if your body is not involved in that, you also have to feel what it is that you want to create in the present moment, not in the future. So, everyone has a destination that they want to achieve, but everyone gets there and it's like, oh, I'll do it again. I'll do it in 3 years. I'll do it in 5 years. And you'll just keep going. So really visualization is understanding you are creating all the time. You don't just have to sit down for a minute and go, okay, cool, I'm just going to create a visualization of what I want to feel or achieve. Again, most of the time when people do that, it's all external. It's never internal. So, it's like, let's visualize like what having strength and, clarity of mind and your mental and metabolic health as a feeling internally, instead of anchoring it in something externally. Like, I'm going on a holiday and I need to go into a bikini, or I've got an event, or whatever it may be. Those things just don't work long term.
Very interesting. How do you reconcile that with somebody who's very ambitious?
Well, again, you can be ambitious, amazing, but it's all around going, where am I doing it from and what am I doing it for? Again, you can have ambition, but making sure that it's very much your own and it's not required to be validated or externalized through the environment. And then if you don't get that, then that means that you're not good enough.
That is a big one for me, right? Like, because I'm always living in the future.
Most people do.
Yeah.
We either live in the future or the past. So if we don't give our mind a current position of, okay, am I unconscious here or am I conscious? Then your unconscious will always take over, because that's the most conditioned familiarity. And the mind will always go, well, I'm going to go to the future, which is out there somewhere. But your past is generally brought with you. So your future is generally a recollection of your past, unless you become very conscious in the middle of that.
I see what you're saying. And let me see if that's right, what I'm getting. So your past trauma, whatever happened, is kind of like what's creating maybe for some people this ambition, and so, which kind of keeps you on this drive to try and heal something, but once you get it, you want more.
Yeah.
But see, I know that, and I like it.
Well, again, what we've also do,
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, if you really like it and love it, and it really serves you at a very conscious space in the relationship with yourself, great. But what we've got to do is go, well, where does your mind go when we even talk about, well, what is the relationship with myself? What are those values? Are they actually mine internally, or are they anchored in the environment? Which we can have both, but you can't have the anchored ones externally overriding your own personal value structures. Because like I said earlier, if I ask someone, like, tell me what your values are, most of the time when they go through them, the externalization of them are all outside. The mind travels outside. You can verbalize them, but they're all around externalization. They're not internal. But your environment between the age of 0 to 7 and between 7 to around 12, 13 years of age, that's where your nervous system and your environment and your unconscious and conscious mind get patterned and programmed from. So anyone in authority to you basically becomes your beliefs and your values. And energetically, if you are in a flight or flight environment, or very driven, conscientious, you've got to, get top grades or whatever it may be, that becomes your unconscious foundation. So your nervous system has to operate on that, because anything in opposition to that doesn't feel very comfortable. Even though we've also got to look at, well, what is your nervous system doing when it's up here? If you are ambitious, we've got to make sure that your nervous system is still calm, not pushing.
Yeah, we can talk for hours about this specific point, but I'm going to spare everybody this part of it. Okay. Let's talk now about the cravings, because I have a feeling that a lot of people might reach out to you for weight loss or food addiction. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. So again, weight loss is the first thing because it's a very conditioned thing. But then I have to, turn that around and say, hey, that's just a side effect of working with me. Because again, you have to understand the relationship with yourself, the patterns that have been created. Let's get that food anchor lowered, bring the anchor back to yourself and raise your value. And then that's where that kind of disordered eating or addictive patterns start to reverse. But also too, that's why I use food in a ketogenic or carnivore protocol, because it blunts cravings. But also too, in that, I talk about different cravings. So I talk about head cravings, heart cravings, and biological cravings.
Okay. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So biological is just when we're addicted to certain foods like that dopamine, sugar, that's a physicality of like, I'm stressed, I've got this memory, I'm going to eat those things because that's just going to help me feel better. Heart cravings are more around the emotional anchor of self, where we've got an emotional void, which we're then filling with those anchors externally. So an emotional void is you not filling up that yourself and understanding the relationship with yourself first and foremost over food, or whatever food or nutrition looks like to that person. But that's also been learned, because a lot of the time, most women that I've worked with, their mums have been on a diet, or they've been told, don't eat that's going to make you fat. Yeah, I even remember one lady said, her mum had said to her, you better not eat that because no boy will ever love you. Bang, done. And then that's like, well, that's not mine.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But the head craving is more the psychological shift of understanding when you're very familiar in a pattern and you've got to stop it. So you've got to reframe yourself right there and then to go, okay, I can see what that looks like, but then give them the tools to actually reframe the psychological pattern. Yeah. Gotcha. So when people just go, oh, I've got all these cravings, I'm like, yeah, okay, let's talk about which one. They can all overlap, but a lot of the time it's this heart craving of lack of self-worth, no value. So, once we build all that up, food just becomes, I'm choosing this to nourish and feed and fuel myself, not because I'm sad or I need something to, de-stress me.
I love this. Yeah, I think that's really where the work is. It's all psychological work and understanding everything you're talking about. And that's really, I'm not a trained psychologist. By working on myself, I had to learn all these things with personal development. So now when I see a coaching client, they all come to me first just for weight loss and food addiction, sugar addiction. And it always comes back to what we're talking about. It's the mindset, it's the psychology, all this stuff. So
the thing is, with even the word addiction and things like that, we've got to be really mindful, because the mind will grab onto that. And secondly, if we pull that apart, it's like, well, hold on, let me just talk about you not being attached to you, because this sugar process has been something that's, been used to bypass your lack of self-worth and your feeling about yourself. So let's build that up, and then you won't ever have a problem again with food.
Yeah, I love that you've said that, because I try to remember not to say the word addiction as
attachment.
Because it's a label. And so many people, we all have different definitions of the same word. So if we're engaging in a conversation, and let's say I'm saying something about addiction, but the way you define addiction is completely different than mine. And it just, like, let's define the word. What do we mean by addiction first, if we are going to use it,
Yeah. The other part of that too, words have that energetic footprint. So, it's really good getting used to your client's narrative and the way that they speak, because then what happens is, if you say, okay, let's use the word addiction, and then I'm like, okay, I want you to go on your body and tell me where you feel it. And all of a sudden you'll be out of here, but you'll be in your body, and you'll have a feeling or a sensation of where that addiction pattern and vibrational state has been anchored. And every single time, we're never in our bodies. We've got all this patterning going on, but we're always up here. Same with, like if I say to someone, let's look at how we get to choose our food, and people are like, oh, I can't get rid of my bread. I'm like, okay, so tell me where that's showing up in your body. Tell me what that looks like and sounds like and feels like. And then again, it's like, oh, I feel naked because I don't know what to do with that, because I'm not having that anchor. It's
Wow.
all in their body. Yeah.
That is so fascinating. Okay, let me change gears a little bit and ask you about what are your thoughts on longevity? Um, do you, I am fascinated with anti-aging research. Like the study I was telling you about, this is last night. It came out from Harvard, and
Okay.
George Church, a very famous anti-aging expert, they
Yeah.
published this study where they gave a combination gene therapy for, it was in mice, but literally reversed obesity, even though they gave
Wow.
them a high-fat diet. High-fat diet in mice gives them obesity, right?
Yep.
Reversed obesity and type 2 diabetes in the aged mice, brought them back, even though they kept them on this high-fat diet. And I was
Yeah.
just, I had to read it. So what are your thoughts on, do you seek that out? What are, or your philosophy about it? Because I know there's also like a worldview that revolves around that.
Yeah, I just think we've really got to understand, well, what does longevity mean to each person, whether it's an external physicality or an internal. So for me, it's an internal thing. I know my externalization will take, if I'm looking after my internal, the external will take care of itself. But also too, it's about, how we think and how we feel, and just to be able to be present. So I'm always like, you know what? I don't know what the future looks like, but I don't live there. I live here, and every single thing that I consciously choose is allowing me to lead me where I want to be, as in, again, don't have a crystal ball, but how I feel, my energy, my capability. If I didn't do what I did for myself, I wouldn't be able to show up for my clients. So for me, that's really my marker of, if I can do that from a longevity point,
Yeah.
that's really my value. Yeah. And I'm really, I also get NAD IVs and all of those kind of things as well, and glutathione and vitamin C, because, we definitely lose NAD as we get older. And I just think that personally for me, and some of my clients do get them, but I love them. And for
NAD
me, it's,
plus infusions.
yeah,
How much of a difference have you felt, like the first
huge.
time you did it, really? Yeah. I keep
So the
hearing
first
that.
time the first time I did it, everyone was like, oh, just be prepared. You've got to get used to a bit of a tolerance with it. And I'm like, yeah, cool, it'll be fine. There's a little bit, didn't really have too much response. And then the next day, though, I was just like, wow, I actually felt like Superwoman. It was really night and day. And then I did another one 3 weeks later, which was a whole new experience. Like, whoa, it was tough. Like they're 3 hours, I'm sure they're 3 hours maybe everywhere, but the tolerance that I had to kind of get used to was something that, yeah, I'd heard it, but then I experienced it. And then I had lots of detox reactions throughout the whole 3 hours. But I kept saying to the IV nurse, can we turn it down, please? Because it was just like this pressure, and then it would release. And I kind of felt like I was in labor again. I was trying to breathe through it. But it's very
Wow.
interesting. Yeah, that reaction versus my first one. But again, once that IV finishes, and they fill it out with, so they put magnesium in it as well here, but also to fill it out with vitamin B's, just to close off the cell just gently, because your mitochondria is just on fire. But then again, Sarah, the next day, just huge difference. Yeah, it's like a superpower. It's pretty phenomenal.
That's so exciting to hear.
I love it.
Does it last? Do you feel like that
Yeah.
shift lasts? And do you know like exact how long does
Well,
it last?
for me, I've noticed around 3 weeks.
Mhm.
But I also believe that, because the way that I eat, and I do eat a carnivore protocol, I think my body is, in far more metabolic position, whereas someone that maybe was on, a processed kind of diet I think would really struggle, and probably not get the response that I would get.
Gotcha. And are these expensive, or if people are interested in seeking that out?
Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing like a
Yeah,
ballpark.
no. So the glutathione and vitamin C here is around 385, so that's Australian dollars, and up to, so depending on the amount of, say, NAD you get, like I only get like 150 grams. I'm not, I'm like, after the last response, I'm like, I'll just build up slowly. And they're around 580 to 600, but it's 3 hours. Yeah. So it's time, but also too, it's worth it. And a lot of autoimmune, I have a lot of clients. So I also work out of a clinic, which I'm surrounded by integrative doctors as well. So, we very much support each other, and a lot of my clients will get IVs and for autoimmune and things like that. So I couldn't recommend them more.
That's it. I'm sold. I have to
Yeah.
look around me here some NAD plus infusions, because you can't just, if you get the NR or the NMN supplements,
Yeah.
it's so hard to source. They lose potency after 2 months. They have to be refrigerated, and all the brands I've looked into just does not really pass the sniff test. So I'm not excited to
Yeah,
get
you just, IV is king, really.
yeah.
And it normally takes around, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes before you really start to feel something happening. But again, your tolerance level just gets more and more. And yeah, so I'm actually due for another one soon. So I'm excited.
I love that. What's next for Dr. Natalie West?
So I have a lot of speaking engagements as well, which I really wanted to focus on this year. So I'm talking at Regenerate with Dr. Chafee and the Dr. Max Gillane. So, again, circadian rhythms are a part of my protocol, which is super important. Yeah, so really it's that. I've just putting a new ebook together, which I've nearly finalized, on nutrient depletion of meds. So I've gone through and really looked at most medications around the world and basically put together each mineral component. So I'm just finalizing that, which I think is really important. I've shared it with a lot of doctors here, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't even know that." So I definitely know it's a really important thing to share. And just working with clients, clients all over the world, and that's just where I love doing it, and being present in that.
I love that.
And hopefully getting to the US.
Like travel and move here or visit us?
No, just work. Yeah. So there's a hopefully a conference that we want to kind of get, a carnivore conference off the ground. So we're doing one here in April. We just did one in April and November. So it'd be great to be able to, bring that to the US as well. So yeah.
That would be so exciting. I will definitely be there if you do set it up. It's very exciting stuff.
And I'm doing a carnivore, women's carnivore retreat as well, in Adelaide, at some point. So me and another amazing carnivore are working on that. And I think it's just really great for women to be able to be in a collective group of conscious women and, help people really just take control of their health.
I think that's really interesting, because I do feel like we need big female influencers in the carnivore space that can communicate to women. I feel like a lot of the men carnivores, it's a little rough around the edges, and women are a little bit freaked out by it.
Yeah, but also too, they don't have hormones like we do, right? So I think that's really important when you are talking about female hormones and carnivore, and sometimes it's protocols that you hear won't work for a lot of people, right? And they get frustrated and they think it's them, but it's more around going, hey, let's get your cortisol checked, let's get your hormones done, because you're doing everything right on paper. But if your cortisol is through the roof and you're stressed and you're not sleeping and you're really probably not eating enough either, I see that a lot, like people just don't eat enough protein. So I just really want to be able to hold space for women to, but also to help them understand their mind and their own patterning and programming, and really give them back the power to go, hey, yes, I've been operating like this for maybe 30 or 40 years, but you actually don't have to. You can actually stop it and rewrite a whole new road. but you've got to be present to do that. And that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Right. I love that. You know what I feel like I would do? I feel like I would stay on the hamster wheel that we were talking about until aging is cured. And then once aging is cured, and I know I won't die because I have access to the anti-aging cures,
Yeah.
then I'll be like, Dr. West, I need you to help me be present. Stop living in the future. I feel like
Yeah.
I would get the best of both worlds this way. Problem.
Oh, it's there's nothing more powerful than being present in your mind and really having a still mind, because most people don't. We are just like, this is all the time, right? And it's being able to bring that peace and that calm in, and to be very aware of, right, what is it right here, right now, that I'm actually creating, and where I'm operating from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So again, how I work with my clients is how I got to where I am. So, I walk my talk. I do exactly the same protocols because they work. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to sit in front of my clients and teach them how to be conscious if I wasn't, or if I was being triggered in my environment, left, right, and center, or if I was living in my future. I know my future and it exists in the present moment. And that's what I say to people. If you want to create a new future, you need to do it from the present moment. And you need to be very, very clear what that looks like, sounds like, feels like, but it's got to be coming from an internal relationship with yourself and filling emotional voids. Don't fill it with anything externally.
Mm, beautiful. Very well said. What a beautiful way to end this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. West. Where
Thank you.
can people find you, connect with you, work with you?
Yeah, so Instagram is generally my first go. So it's natalie.e.west, or my website, which is natalieewest.com. And for anyone that's listening that wants to reach out, I've got a 30-minute free discovery chat. So we can just see where you're at. And if I'm aligned with you, great, we can go from there.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I post those links in the description box
Thank you.
below. I appreciate you giving us your time. And I'm sorry for scheduling the interview at 5 a.m. your time. I know you wake up early. It's
Yeah, I
fine.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
And
a
you,
sunrise girl.
right? Because, yeah, I could feel like your brain is on. It's not like, I need an hour to wake up. You're fine. Perfect.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for sticking with us till the end. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure you let us know by giving this YouTube video a thumbs up, subscribing, and hitting that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.